What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another War Within video. Hope you're all doing very well. There are some massive changes that are happening right now this week on the reset. So Tuesday for your North American guys, Wednesday for the European lads. I'm going to go through a bunch of the changes that are happening because they're really important, not only to classes, like there's a bunch of tuning on classes and some big changes, but also to some core mechanics like the Challenger's Peril in Mythic Plus. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, let's start with the classes. There's two patch notes here that have come through. So this was from several days ago, and this has all the big changes that are coming through. It's going to be consolidated in a second. Then there were a bunch of like updates that came through on top of that with like a bunch of bug fixes that are pretty important, and I will get to those as well. But we're going to start out, let me my notes over here. We're going to start out with just the class tuning changes, and they have been wonderfully kind of summarized here for us in this chart. I'm just going to scoot this over a little bit. It's a little bit more centered for you guys, okay, to help out. And I'll shove this over here, okay? So here's what's going on. Patch 11.05, this is the October 29th hotfixes. Here's the buffs and the nerfs. I'm going to go through some of them and give you a little bit more detail. So the Sand Lane Blood DK one looks like it's a massive buff, but basically there's a big amount of variance there because of the Blood Beast RNG. If you've played Sand Lane Blood DK, you understand what I'm talking about. You get this Blood Beast occasionally that gets summoned, and it ends up doing a ridiculous amount of damage in AoE if you have a big pack of mobs stacked up. But if you don't have that, then the damage is pretty low on it, which is kind of annoying. They are also saying that Vampiric Strike, I think, is still not fixed. Like there's a hotfix that hasn't been applied to it. Now we'll check right here really quickly. Yeah, there's still nothing there. So some variance there. Balanced Druid getting a little bit of a buff. They're basically just shuffling some talents, and they're saying it's a 5% buff. I think there's a new kind of mushroom build going on, a dot build for Balanced Druid potentially, and we'll have to see how that kind of plays out. But Boomkids were already good in my opinion. Like fine, totally fine. But they're getting another buff, which is nice. Resto Druid's not really getting any buffs. There are buffs in the patch notes for Resto Druid, but like it's basically Dream of Cenarius damage transferring into healing, and it's not necessarily something you're going to take in every single situation. So is it really a big buff? I don't think it's a huge buff. They're calling it like a neutral change here. BM Hunter, the AoE changes they're saying are disappointed given the developer note, priority damage and Mythic Plus nerf. So there was a note right here. Beast Mastery is overperforming on single target. We'd like to reduce its single target while improving its lackluster AoE. So there are some big changes here to Beastmaster. Barb Shot going down by 25%, Stomp going up by 50%, and Multi-Shot going up by 100%, which again, to me is a little bit weird because like BM Hunter's AoE damage primarily comes from their pet. I'm not saying Multi-Shot is not a contributor at all, and let me know if I'm totally wrong about this in the comments down below, but like buffing Multi-Shot feels like out of line with what BM Hunter's doing. Like just, I don't know, buff Kill Cleave even more, buff Stomp a little bit more than you did here. I don't know, it's kind of weird in my opinion. So BM's only identity right now is a single target like Beast. Like they are very good, but maybe this will bring them in line on the AoE front. We'll have to wait and see. We'd love to hear from you hunters down below. Dark Ranger for BM is the exact same situation. They're saying it's a slight buff in AoE, but then the single target is actually neutral. So because of the Dark Ranger changes, that's the thought there. A lot of the hunter changes are very minimal, okay? They're very minimal in what's happening. All right. Holy Paladin is basically getting less mana regeneration, which I think is going to push them even further into the Avenging Crusader build, which tends to use a lot less mana because Crusader Strike and Judgment don't use anywhere near as much mana as, say, even Holy Shock does or Holy Light. So, be interesting to see if the builds change for Holy Pally. Disc Priest has been like rising to the top of the meta in terms of Mythic Plus. They're in a lot of the highest Mythic Plus keys right now, basically Disc Priest and Resto Shaman. So interesting to see them getting a buff here, and I think they're considering it like a 1 to 2% buff overall. In my mind, I think that's probably true, but the Power Word Radiance healing going up by 20% is going to feel really good for anybody playing Discipline Priest, because the hardest part about Disc Priest in reality is understanding how to do the atonement healing and how to ramp into your atonement healing. So this doesn't really change that, except this gives you a little bit more coverage of people's health bars outside of atonement healing, because Power Word Radiance just hits really hard. It is a hard hitting heal. It feels very good to press, and it of course applies atonement to everybody. So buffing it actually, in my mind, is going to help the people who are not as good at Disc Priest to help get them into when there's like an oh crap moment, when things are really hitting the fan, then they can press Radiance and it will do even more than it already does right now. So, and then single target flash healing is up, which is nice as well. Very, very cool. They tried to buff some Oracle stuff, but basically the guys here think that the Oracle stuff is not really going to do enough to move it past Void Weaver. Okay. Shadow Priest got an AoE buff. Psychic Link is back up to 30% of the damage that you dealt. It was 25. The roller coaster of Psychic Link has been really comical. It's like started at 50, it went to 40, down to 20, and then or down to 15, I think, then back up to 20, then back up to 25. Now we're back up to 30. I think that's how it went. It's literally had 6 or 7 changes now. So this is going to be a damage buff in AoE, and it's going to go up with target count, but it doesn't really solve the fundamental problems with Shadow Priest that people have not enjoyed for a long time. So hopefully they just go back to helping us. Just go back to us fighting the Insanity Bar. Come on, we love fighting the Insanity Bar. That was a lot of fun. That was a long time ago now. Sinrogue getting nerfed a little bit makes sense to me. It should make sense to everybody. Sinrogue has been absolutely dominating in Mythic Plus in particular, and in single target I think it's doing very well as well. So small nerfs here. They're basically saying somewhat estimated based on the bug fixes. So Master Assassin critical strike chance granted during effect reduced by 5%. They're saying that that's, you know, going to be nerfed a little bit. Now we'll see. That doesn't seem like that big of a change to warrant like 2 or 3%, but that's what these guys think it's going to be. So there you go. Ellie Shaman is the big topic of conversation, right? Ellie Shaman is pretty huge in terms of the changes that have been coming through. Oh, I skipped Mistweaver Monk. I'll get to Mistweaver Monk, I promise. Ellie Shaman has gone through a big roller coaster here. Basically, Farseer is getting really buffed, and then Stormbringer was getting nerfed substantially. And then they also were going to nerf the Ascendant stuff, which was the biggest nerf by far, was to nerf our overload damage inside of Ascendance. And then they recently just got rid of that. So there's a class update here to Shamans. This happened yesterday. Echo Chamber and the Ascendance change got reverted. So you will still have 150% overload damage inside of Ascendance. And Echo Chamber is going to increase your overloads by 40% instead of 20, which is what the nerf was going to do. So these changes, I think, are going to be less than what is showing here. I think the most substantial change was this Ascendance one. If we still are able to have those moments where we press Ascendance and we just delete a pack in front of us, which is what's happening right now, then I don't think anything's really going to change. There might actually be a really interesting Farseer build that's going on now, because the chain lightning from Farseers went up, the ancestors are going to go up for Lava Burst, and the Ellie Blast goes up. So potentially we could flip into an Ascendance based build with Farseer instead of Stormbringer. It's probably not going to happen, but just an idea. Also, Ice Fury damage went up. So I think the changes for Ellie Shaman are kind of a net neutral in my opinion. Sure, Stormbringer went down. The build that you're playing right now went down in value. No doubt about that, okay? But this was the biggest change, and it got reverted. And then there's also a buff here to Ice Fury. So we'll have to wait and see when we actually get into the keys this week and see what it's like. My end of the opinion here, my last thought here, is that Ellie Shaman is going to stay S tier, if not be at the very top of A tier. But I think it's still S tier in my opinion. Okay, let me go back to Monk really quickly. There's a very long explanation about Monk. So Monk got a lot of buffs, which is awesome. 6% to all healing. We're talking Mistweaver Monk. Sorry. Awaken Jadefire spinning crane kick does more damage. Jadefire Teachings does more damage now. Ancient Teachings is gone up by 20%, which is really big. And then Rushing Wind Kick basically has doubled in its value. So the Renewing Mist healing that it provides is 100% now instead of 50%, which is massive. So in the raid in particular, you're going to run Rushing Wind Kick, I think, and you're going to be doing big ramps with Thunder Focus Tea, where you're spreading Renewing Mists, a bunch of really long lasting Renewing Mists, and then you do a Rushing Wind Kick and it accelerates those Renewing Mists and causes them to heal for double the amount for the remaining duration. So you could do a big Yulon ramp and then Rushing Wind Kick, and it'll be even more valuable than it is right now. So that's really, really, really cool. Okay. They did nerf the Jade Bond Mastery Gust of Mist healing from Jade Bond. So this is basically, they're saying they're excited that the Chi-Ji Mastery build exists and it's powerful, but numerically its output has been above what we're comfortable with. So they're decreasing that. So For the build that I'm running with Master of Harmony, this is just a straight up buff no matter what. And it's amazing because I think Mistweaver's already in a really, really great spot. So we'll have to wait and see. I think Mistweaver is going to move much higher up in the standings here for healers, in my opinion. I think it's very strong now, in Mythic Plus especially. Okay? Enhancement Shaman did get a flat nerf, and this has not been reverted at all. So lightning bolt damage, chain lightning damage, tempest damage down by 10, 10, 15. So that's a substantial nerf for Enhancement Shaman. They are doing very, very well right now. They are S tier, just like Ellie Shaman is. So we'll have to wait and see where this brings them down. This probably brings them down to A tier, in my opinion. I still think they're going to be really good. And the reason you're bringing a Shaman to most of the groups that are bringing them is for like Poison Cleanse and Bloodlust and Sky Fury. It's kind of like the Shadow Priest situation from Dragonflight, where you brought Shadow Priests because they had Mind Soothe and Mass Dispel, and then they kind of nerfed all those things and it made Shadow Priest in a really tough spot. But the damage from Enhancement Shaman will still probably be fine, and you're still going to bring them for all those other reasons. So this is definitely a nerf, but I don't know if it's going to change where Enhancement Shaman shows up, right? I think it's probably going to be the same. Lots of buffs for all the Warlocks, and they're basically talking about how Soul Harvester is definitely the best option here, but Hellcaller is getting a really big buff as well. It's still going to be a little bit behind Soul Caller and Single Target, but it's a lot closer than it used to be, which is kind of cool. I mean, the Warlocks, in my opinion, were all doing fine in my keys, and there are some big buffs here, like 7% single target, 6.5 AoE, 8.6 single target, 11% AoE for Destro Lock. That's some big buffs there. So good for the Warlocks. In my opinion, they were already doing fine. They were probably A tier, like middle of the pack A tier, or a little bit at the end of the A tier, but like now they're going to be even higher, I think. Okay. Warriors are getting much needed buffs. Arms Warrior has been in the doghouse for basically the last couple of weeks, so they're getting big buffs for Colossus and Slayer. Fury Warrior is getting Mountain Thane and Slayer buffs, both of them, which is really good. They're basically saying that this is going to increase sustained multi-target, and it's not going to affect your AoE burst. So you're just getting a better damage profile in dungeons in particular with that sustained damage coming out, which is cool. Prot Warrior did get some buffs essentially, which I'm confused about, because they're getting the Colossus single target damage is going up. I don't think anybody's running Colossus anyway, so maybe this doesn't matter for Prot Warrior, but they are getting execute damage by 10% as well. So pretty big changes there. And Prot Warrior is already like meta, right? So but anyway, that's it. Those are the major changes coming in for the classes. A lot of big stuff. I would say the biggest winners are probably Mistweaver Monk and probably the Warlocks, if I had to really think about it. The Warlocks and the Warriors would be the biggest winners. I think the Ellie Shaman changes are not as bad as they used to be because the Ascendance bug is getting fixed, and I know that's going to reduce a lot of damage because the Ascendance bug was triggering overload like way too many times. So that is definitely going to get fixed, and that's going to reduce our damage as well. But the fact that they reverted the Ascendance changes, the overload damage in Ascendance is fantastic, and I think Ellie Shaman's still going to be just fine. Okay, let me move forward here to the Challenger's Peril note. This is really important. So on October 29th, the update Challenger's Peril is the thing that makes the death timers go from 5 seconds to 15 seconds. So here's what's happening. Challenger's Peril now adds 90 seconds to the timer of every Mythic Plus Keystone, in addition to the 15-second death penalty. So they're not getting rid of the 15-second death penalty, which is interesting because everybody who plays Mythic Plus right now would tell you they should get rid of it. Everybody. This 15-second death timer only punishes players who are worse at the game than the people who are at the very top of the game. The people who are running the plus 16s and plus 17 keys right now, they're not dying anyway. If any of them die during the key is over, basically. So this 15-second death penalty doesn't affect them, but it does affect the people who are not as good at the game as them and who make some mistakes and end up dying, but they're trying to push like they're plus 10 for the week, and they're just struggling to do that. This 15-second death penalty is really bad for those players. So first of all, I hate this affix, and I feel like Blizzard should get rid of it because it punishes players who are not as good at the game. And that's not what you want. You don't want these like abnormally punishing players who are worse at the game at like an accelerated rate. That's just not what you want. The fact that it adds 90 seconds, here's what it does. It essentially adds 6 deaths to your key, right? 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, 90. That's 6 deaths that you can get that you could not get before. Okay. Now, if you don't die 6 times, then of course it's just adding 90 seconds to your key. You're getting more time to do every key, which is fantastic. That's a great thing. And it is good that they're adding this, but I think that it's not going to solve any of the lever problems that we have right now, in my opinion. Right now, we have this huge problem in Mythic Plus where people are leaving the keys after the first pull, because they'll do the first pull and everybody will wipe and you'll lose 2 minutes off the clock, or a minute and a half, and then people will leave because they're like, well, the key is doomed. And that's an attitude problem that is only going to get solved if the 15-second death penalty goes away, if it goes back to being a 5-second death penalty. This is not going to get solved, in my opinion, by adding 90 seconds to the timer. So I feel like this is a nice gesture from Blizzard. It's nice to have this, but in reality, I don't feel like it's going to change anything when it comes to people leaving the keys because they're pissed that you didn't time it, or that everybody died. Like, that attitude problem is not going to change until this gets changed, in my opinion. It is nice, though. I think people who are timing plus 16s and 17s now will very likely be able to time like a plus 18. It's going to be able to push them into the hierarchy levels. If you're timing plus 10s and 11s and 12s right now, you should be able to probably go up by 1 key level, I would say, because of this change. As long as you're playing well and not dying, then you're just getting 90 more seconds, okay? That's the big change for Challengers Peril. The last change is that Heroic Queen Ansarak got nerfed this week, which is really nice. I think for people who are trying to get AOTC and they're struggling, that is a really great change, because the raid is kind of like easy, a little bit harder. Queen Ansarak, like, the difficulty curve in this raid is really stupid. It's not difficult until you get to this boss, and then it's like, what is going on? This is like totally different now. So the fact that they're nerfing this is fantastic. For anybody who hasn't got AOTC yet, this is a great change for them. Okay, those are the major changes, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I think it's great. I think the changes that they're making have mostly been on point. This is actually good. Ellie Shaman deserved to get a change. So did Enhanced Shaman. They deserve to get nerfs, in my opinion. All these guys getting buffs are great. I think they're needed. Blood DK damage was terrible. Arms and Fury Arms in particular wasn't doing very well. I don't think the change to Mistweaver was necessary, in my opinion, but I'm happy for it because I'm playing a lot of Mistweaver now. And then the Warlock changes are great as well. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know if you disagree with any of these changes that have gone on. I would love to hear from you down there. Thank you so much again for watching. Love you guys. I'll see you in the next one.